ago in a series of particularly challenging elder law matters. Most of these involved contested guardianships and conservatorships, basically when things had gone wrong. And I was just amazed by the ability of Heidi and her team to bring harmony and direction to a really chaotic situation. And so I'm really pleased to introduce them. Heidi is the Executive Director of ElderTree Care Management Services. She has been doing it for over 25 years, and she's done it at every level and done it very well. And we have Emily Apyan as well. Emily is also an extremely experienced practitioner. She's the Vice President of Operations there. She's also a licensed clinical social worker, and she's a bit of a veterans benefits guru. And as a veteran myself, I can tell you it's very near and dear to my heart. And we'll talk a little bit about that without letting it consume the whole 45-minute block. This is an extremely underserved area with a very high veteran population. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and we're very lucky to have you here with us. So without further ado, we'll just dive right in and start with a pretty simple question, I think. So Heidi, what is an aging life care manager?
So we are aging life care managers. An aging life care manager is board certified. We come from different backgrounds: gerontology, occupational therapy, social work, former administrators of communities, and we bring that lens, that talent, to this field of aging life care management. A long time ago, if you had ever heard of it, we might have been called geriatric care managers, but the truth is that that's a misnomer because our clients range from 18 to 106. So we do run the gamut. And so we come from these different backgrounds, and our goal is to be an advocate and a resource and to connect you with what you need as you need it. We work in 8 knowledge areas. Now I put on my reading glasses so I make sure I say it. So I once had a professor at the University of Texas Medical School who called them as cheaters. I almost called them that just now. We do crisis intervention. So what Chris was saying is that I came in with 2 solo agers that were in crisis and had to be assisted in their home and then into a place where they were safer. And we had to do it very rapidly. So we do crisis management. It also includes if you have a medical emergency. Health and disability. So along with working with aging adults, we also work with mental health and special needs. I have aging adults who I work with who have aging adult special needs children who are now adults themselves, and working through what are the next steps going to be. What is it going to be when maybe the parent who has been the caregiver for 50 years is now aging themselves, and how do we gracefully transition and come in so that that adult child, when they are on their own, how are we going to make sure they have what they need in place?
So when does this process start, typically? Is there a typical answer? I don't know. When should it start?
When should it start? So the best time to bring this in is early on. Chris is going to make me say my famous statement of, that's where he was going, I knew it. I am best as Smokey the Bear. I work every day as a firefighter, and when needed, I come in and do an arson inspection. And what that means is if you bring us in early, we can prevent things from happening. We are looking down the road all the time. It's not just today. It's tomorrow. It's down the road what's coming. Sometimes things are going great, and one misstep, you have a fall, an illness comes about. You're married and something changes with your spouse. And sometimes we come in and we settle things down. And once in a while we come in when sort of a crisis has happened. And now we're at a place where we have a big pivot. And then we help you with those things as well. When you need someone, if you need someone financial, we connect you with financial resources. If you need legal, we're going to make sure you've got to have your documents in place, so we help you with those kinds of things. So connecting you with what you need.
Well, what advice would you give to someone who's just starting this process? Maybe this is the first forum, or maybe they've been to where this is even a discussion point. It's overwhelming, right? There's so much involved, there's so many role players. How do you get started? What's the first point of contact?
So if they were to contact us, they just reach out to us and we start that conversation. starting the conversation is the first step. A lot of times we don't want to start these conversations. It's hard to think about what happens down the road, but if you prepare for it and we start having those conversations, it's far less stressful.
And you mentioned, they could call you, but who are some of the other shareholders in the process? What other role players are involved in this beyond care managers, aging life caregivers, attorneys? Who else is in play?
Who else that we connect people?
Right.
So very often we connect people with agencies for AIDS, right? So many of you, in fact, if I said, who in this room is a caregiver? Raise your hand. Many of you have been caregivers and you didn't even know it. You had a neighbor who was having
I cared for my mom for over a decade. It was hard, I was younger then. I thank God that I was still in the 40s doing that. But I learned a lot.
You do. As a caregiver, we often say you have a 36-hour day because the day goes far beyond when you are doing that hands-on care. Sometimes it's impacted, you're sleeping with kind of one eye open, you're always listening. If you were parents, it's a very familiar feeling. And when you were younger and the kids went to sleep and you were kind of always listening, and now the circle comes around and you're doing it for an adult, for a spouse, but also for neighbors. Sometimes you may notice that a neighbor, things are changing with a neighbor. You're a physician, you're a nurse, and someone comes into your doctor's office and you can see things are changing, things are different.
Do you coordinate with medical personnel as well?
We do. We do. Every day. We coordinate. And it can be everything from you need a specialist and you don't know where to start, or you have these appointments and getting to them is a challenge, to making sure that you get the follow-up care that you need. We work with individuals. It could be that you're a caregiver and now you need to have a medical procedure. So the other day, I went to the hospital with the caregiver and we made sure there was someone in the home for her husband. And then I was with her for those 6 hours while she was at the hospital, made sure she got her prescriptions and got her home safely.
So I imagine one of the biggest decisions as we get into this process as caregivers is, are we going to go in an aging in place direction, or are we considering assisted living options? So how do you advise people? What are kind of the pros and cons of one versus the other?
So aging in place, we all want to age in place. We have our homes. Many of us have lived in our homes 40 years, 50 years. Many of them are paid for. It's great, right? But it can work as long as it can work. But sometimes something happens that it's a change. So maybe you're in a multi-level home, and we could have our occupational therapist comes in, she's CAP certified, she looks at the home, and we figure out what needs to happen to adapt the home in order for it to be safe. Sometimes it goes beyond that. For instance, the average cost for an aide is $40 to $45 per hour. If you need aides for 10 hours a day, and you start doing the math, that adds up very, very quickly. So sometimes that's where we begin to have the conversation. Is it time for us to look at what the next step is? When you start thinking about that, about a community, you start early. Because Emily was an administrator of several assisted livings, and she will tell you that you don't want to have to move when you don't have choices. Exactly. You make the choice early. Those deposits are refundable. Put that deposit down, know where you're going, be on that wait list, and then you get first refusal. I had someone that stayed first on a wait list for 7 years. And finally, one day it came where they said, yes, now we're ready to move. But it was there when you needed it.
Emily, what advice would you give to someone who's trying to choose between different assisted living communities?
That's part of having a care manager and working with an aging life care manager is we get to know you, right? And we're not a facility, right? So I don't have a loyalty to any company, right? I don't work for Erickson, I don't work for Sunrise, I don't work for Brightview, right? I am working with you. My priority is to you. I am responsible to help you do and find what you want for yourself, right? So it behooves me to know you and understand, what are your preferences? What brings you joy, right? What matters to you at the end of the day? Do you want a community that's close to your daughter? Do you want a community that focuses on activities? Do you want a community that has a physician that's there 3 days a week? Do you want a community that's associated with the military? Or do you want a community that's right next to downtown because you have to go to the Kennedy Center 3 days a week, right? We all have different preferences in life, right? I do, you do, Heidi does, Chris does, right? But I have to know you as a person, or I can't help you make a decision, right? And I have to know everything about you, not everything, okay? Right? I don't need to know everything. You don't need to know everything about me either, right? But I have to know a lot of really important things to help you make the right decision for you. And then we look at all the financial parts of that. Some communities, like Heidi said, you have to put down a deposit. Some communities don't have a deposit, right? And some communities have specials that they run. And I'll tell you, Heidi and I, we know most of the specials going on all the time. You know why? Because they're calling us saying, hey, ElderTree, you got a special, you got anybody that needs to move in? They're calling us all the time. They're sending us emails. I got a text this morning at like 6:30. I said, look, I love you, but don't text me at 6:30 in the morning. Right? So those are the things that your aging life care manager helps you decide what you want and works with you on. Okay, and we'll work through that. And again, it's about, is aging in place what you want for yourself? Or do you want to transition to the appropriate level of care? And that is a fluid decision that may change over time based on what is presenting in your life. Whether those are medical circumstances, financial circumstances, or familial circumstances. And all of that changes. And we understand that, right? I'm from Tennessee. I grew up in Chattanooga, right? And what we say where I'm from is, it's not my first rodeo. Ain't my first rodeo, right? So we help you through that process.
And we're in the community, so very often when people transition, people always say, what's the difference between an aging life care manager and like a senior placement or a senior navigator? We don't get paid by the communities. So lots of times with placement services and navigators, they will only be referring you to communities because they get paid by the community if you move there. We don't have any affiliation with any particular community. Our goal is to place you based on your needs, but we're also in the communities.
Right.
So we are reading those charts for people. We are talking to nursing. We know what the sales department is saying. We know what the website says, and then we know what happens. We know what's really happening behind the scenes.
Yes, and most of us a lot of us that work for ElderTree have worked for one of those companies.
Right.
I have personally worked for at least 2 of those companies that I mentioned earlier. So I know the ins and outs, and I know someone that works at every one of those companies that I just talked about. So a lot of times when we have a question, I'll get on my phone and text and say, hey, you know what, can you tell me, can you talk to me? So we're really able to understand what's happening.
And we stay involved, so we can stay involved as much as you need us to, because there's always a little troubleshooting along the way.
So pivoting a little bit away from the senior themselves, right? So this is obviously senior law day. We're here to talk about the resources available to seniors and the system and the role players and all that, but there's a kind of unsung hero in that process, right? I mean, the caregiver is a special, if not sacred role. I mean, we're honored to do it for our elders and our loved ones, but it's not an easy job, right? And so these individuals are also in a unique position to kind of talk a little bit about, well, what is the impact on the caregiver? So what have you experienced in the field over decades of working with folks? What's this like on the caregiver themselves?
There's caregiver exhaustion. Caregivers, it's a hard role. First of all, you're caregiving for someone who is changing right before your eyes. Now maybe it's caregiving for someone who's just had a medical crisis, broken hip, maybe undergoing treatments, and you know that there's going to be an end to that iteration. But very often, there's an involvement of dementia. Dementia is this huge umbrella. 144 reasons you can have dementia. Some are transient, some are not transient. In fact, they predicted by 2033, 1 in 3 individuals will be diagnosed with dementia. That's a huge number. And so we work a lot with supporting caregivers, not only with what do we need to bring in, right? What do you need to support you? Because you can't run 36 hours a day. You know, if you're working with someone who's having cognitive impairment, brain changes, You know, you're so used to it. It looks like your husband or wife or your mother or your father or your cousin or your friend, but they're, you know, I can't even make a meal. I have to know where they are all the time. They just walked out the door. They're misplacing things. They're accusing me of things. So we use a lot of behavioral strategies because you have to learn about a disease that is also changing every day. You know, dementia, you start with dementia, but it's a progressive disease. I would say probably at every table here, there is someone who dementia has touched their lives. But we're also caregivers for mental health, right? There are people who are sitting in this room who have loved ones with mental health challenges. And they're real, and they impact you every single day as well. And so caregivers need strategy. They need to know what can they do to support themselves. When you fly in an airplane, they often say, when the oxygen mask drops, put on your oxygen mask before you help the person next to you. Luckily, we're in an area here where there's a lot of resources for day programs. Perhaps you're a caregiver and you can use a day program to give yourself that respite. Are you affiliated with veterans? You know, is your spouse, your loved one, your family member, are they a veteran? And what can you access to veteran services for respite care? What can you do to fractionally get caregivers to support you so that you can get a break? You have to feed yourself and get a break and clear your brain, or you just run.
Because the whole point is that you put on the oxygen mask so you can breathe, so you can perform.
So that you can help the person next to you.
So working with folks like yourselves and others, we're able to direct caregivers to
Yes.
resources because they're right around the corner and you just don't know about them.
A lot of times it's overwhelming, right? Because if you Google caregivers in Northern Virginia, your phone's gonna blow up. And if you're on, you know, and then you'll start getting ads if you're on Facebook or, things will just come at you. Not all caregiving groups are created equal. And so if there are aids and agencies, very often we're recommending them for very specific reasons. Knowing what resources you can get through your county and your city. You know, let's get what you can get first before you start paying out of pocket. Do you have long-term care insurance? Because if you do, we're going to help you access that and activate that because you paid into it. How many people here have long-term care insurance? Okay, how many people have activated their long-term care insurance? Yeah, that's what happens. And the good news is, decades later, now we have these policies where you get them and they're annuities, and if you don't use it, a family member is your beneficiary. But the plans of long ago are use it and lose it. So knowing, sometimes we have to write rebuttal letters when you get assessed by the long-term care insurance, they say that you don't qualify. And that's when we come in and we help navigate that. You know, and the other thing is there are times when you're going to start looking at how am I going to financially do this? We're going to pivot to veterans benefits, but can you also do that through, are you going to have to work with an overwatcher and look at how are we going to look at our assets so we can do this? Because there's two of us in this equation, and what's going to be for me when I leave here?
So ChatGPT and I did some research before this.
We're very good friends also.
Yeah.
Getting very close. And learned that the National Capital Region, which the military calls the DC area, the DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia, is home to over 1 million veterans. That's 1 million registered veterans. Not including transit folks, homeless folks, folks who just don't bother registering. So that's an enormous number in our community. And that's everything from retired flag officers to voluntarily separated enlisted 20-year-olds. So that's everyone. And a lot of these folks, as we know, leave the service with some serious issues. You don't need to be 106 years old to need help, right? To have mental health struggles, to need court intervention, guardianship, conservatorship sometimes. So the question is, and I also learned that Northern Virginia has the very highest representation of that whole NCR footprint. So almost 2 Now, almost 1/3 of that is right here in Northern Virginia, in the every 4 counties. It's just incredible. So, knowing that there's so many veterans kind of walking amongst us, the question is, are there any resources that are uniquely available to them that you're aware of?
Yes, there are a lot of resources in this area. One, due to the density of the veteran population period, and just because we are here in the capital area. I was previously the Associate Executive Director at the Fairfax. For those of you that are aware, the Fairfax at Fort Belvoir, it is a retirement community. It's a CCRC, which is the abbreviation for Continuing Care Retirement Community, which has independent living, assisted living, memory care, and skilled nursing. It was a community that was made with Marriott and the Army Foundation many years ago, but it was made specifically for retired military and has largely it had at the time 100% military, but is now largely military and government and foreign service. And I was the Associate Executive Director there for several years. So I have a lot of experience working with veterans, military, Fort Belvoir, all the resources they have. Fort Belvoir in particular, but all of the bases here do have a lot of unique benefits for our veterans that they can access by going to the base, right? They also have, for specific veterans, based on their service, their years, and what time periods they were in, specific benefits for them. There are also specific clinics that are available, and all of these things we are aware of in terms of when we work with clients. So a lot of times when ElderTree has a client that comes, we ask for your paperwork.
Yeah, we'll say, do you have your DD 214?
Yeah. We have your, give us your DD 214. Let's see what is available to you. Because sometimes if you serve during these specific years, and I don't remember them off the top of my head, Heidi might remember better than I do, but if you serve during these specific years, specific war times, there are very specific benefits available to you that are not available to anyone else because of specific things that happened during that time that you may have been exposed to. And we can access that. So there are a lot of things like that that are available here. There's a pharmacy on Fort Belvoir where if you were served in specific wars, you can get all of your medications for completely free.
And when we say served in the war, that's kind of a misnomer because people will say, well, I didn't go overseas.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. It's that so for example, during the time of the Vietnam War, and the government has identified these decades, Gulf War, all wars, if you were in service at that time, then there's something called aid and attendance, which is a subsidy that you can get. It is something you financially qualify for. So we use your DD 214 for that. But you may have served and you're disabled. And people often say, well, I wasn't 100% disabled. You don't need to be 100% disabled.
Some benefits are extended just for the service of veteran areas, is that correct?
So, yes, for the military. No. For the military, yes, it's not extended to parents, it is extended to spouses. But if you or your child work for the foreign services, there are scholarships that you can get that you can apply towards your living. So a lot of people don't know that. That is one that you can apply to your parents.
We can. So I'm going to ask that if everybody could please hold any questions or comments. Heidi and I are going to be available over at our table in the back after this, and we're more than happy to continue any conversations, specifically one-on-one conversations. If you have one-on-one situations, we're happy to discuss that with anybody.
So with the aid and attendance, that particular benefit applies to the spouse, even if their loved one has passed. Getting in early with the veteran benefits, especially if like the Fuller Center is just opening up over at Mint Hill, it's one of the new veteran centers. The wait lists are long, and so if you have a family member, even if they have dementia, getting that application in early and getting on that wait list is really important. Transportation is another thing veterans can get to their doctor's appointments. So there's a lot of things out there. There's a Veterans Services Office at Fort Belvoir. You can start there. There are agencies that you can pay to do this for you. You don't have to do that. You can start with your Veteran Services office or billboard. I think you were talking about radar clinic.
Yep.
There you
It's at
go.
Fort Myers.
Yeah. Unfortunately, post-COVID, the geriatric clinics that were in place that spouses could access, they no longer can access that post-COVID. But the individual who serves in the service can.
And a lot of folks are concerned or thinking, well, I was asleep at the switch as I separated, that was a decade ago.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't make any difference.
It's not too late to get in touch with the VA. You may have to wait a little bit, but get your foot in the door, make the claim. There are some benefits, some disability compensation benefits I can give like retroactively. Not all of them, but there's a whole maze to go through, but there's lots of resources, and they're available to any veteran, and they're available to any veteran for free. You just have to know where they are, and be a little proactive, get in touch with them. Folks around here can help you point in that direction.
We often ask people, that's why we ask, you know, did you serve in the military? And then another thing that we'll ask is, where were you stationed? Do you have Parkinson's disease?
Yes.
And you were stationed at Camp Lejeune during the years when the water was contaminated. Were you, because we work with younger adults, were you in the burn pits? Were you near the burn pits during the war? So,
Right. Another thing we run into is a lot of times people focus on their Medicare days when they're in skilled nursing. And the thing that people don't know is once you run out of your Medicare days in skilled nursing, you can still access your TRICARE for Life days if you have TRICARE for Life. But most skilled nursing facilities won't take the time to file for those days. But you can, and you can still get TRICARE for Life days after you run out of your Medicare days. I know that because I was once a skilled nursing social worker, and I would go through the hundreds of pages of documents you had to submit to TRICARE for Life. But they will give you 30 days at a time. So TRICARE for Life will approve 30 days at a time for skilled nursing coverage. And it is the same approved locations as Medicare because they're covered under CMS, it's the same thing. And so the social workers don't necessarily have the bandwidth to do that, but it can very easily be done. So if you run out of your Medicare days in skilled nursing, or I'm not sure about acute care, but usually it falls under the same thing, you still have days if you have TRICARE for Life. You just have to get them approved, and they approve them in typically 30-day blocks, but sometimes they'll do it in 60-day blocks. Typically it's 30-day blocks, but no, you still have that resource available to you if you, quote, run out of skilled nursing days for your Medicare Part A benefits. So there are a lot of things that are available to you.
yeah, and they don't tell you. It's
No.
kind of like
No.
it's like it's this magic box and you don't have the keys to the kingdom. And so very often when we say,
Yeah.
well, what about those TRICARE for Life days? You get sort of this dazed look because they're like, uh-oh, I know.
We have to submit all the documents.
Yes,
you
they
do.
have documents, yes, you do. Or, you know, can this person qualify for acute rehab, which is a whole lot more intensive than skilled nursing rehab, right? You have more hours. And then maybe at acute, maybe they're still not quite ready to go home, and they're saying to the family, oh, well, why don't you just pay for them to go to a community for a respite stay? And sometimes that's fabulous. Sometimes that's a wonderful idea. But sometimes they'll say, well, they could use their skilled days, and it's another one they go, oh, you know, they have the secret.
It's a little bit like going to the DMV, but what I can tell you is generally, the VA and personal anecdote, I'm a veteran, so I was pretty proactive, and I'm a trained attorney, so I'm pretty good generally at looking up regulations and figuring things out and going forward. It was difficult, you know, and you have to kind of slog your way through it, but once you get your foot in the door, it really opens up the aperture of resources that are just sitting there waiting for you to grab them. And they're going to go to waste if you don't. So honestly, it's really important that people know what they don't know, and the best way to do that is to ask someone and access these resource centers that are all over the place. So I would say, definitely don't be discouraged by the fact that you might get a little, I'm not going to say resistance, but a little friction in the early going when you're engaging with these folks. Just be a little forward-leaning and things will happen, but ask around, get in touch with these people. If you have a veteran in your life, or if you're a veteran yourself, or someone that you're taking care of is in that situation, now's the time to be thinking about it and to be pushing that first domino down, because it's going to take a little bit, but the payout will be immense. It can be a really great windfall, and particularly for people who, like Heidi and Emily said, they want to be around other veterans. So maybe we're talking about assisted living communities with a veteran bent. They're out there, and that's sometimes the most comfortable place for folks to age.
Or maybe it's that you are the caregiver in the home and you can get respite hours through veteran services to kind of augment what you're doing.
Right, or you are the caregiver and you need to go on vacation, or you need to go visit a family member and we need to find a respite for the person to take care of for a few weeks while you travel. And it needs to be in a community where there are other veterans, where that person will feel safe and comfortable.
And you won't have the out-of-pocket cost because it's a veteran service. So, I'm all about that. My husband is retired 33 years with the Coast Guard. Flew those search and rescue helicopters, used to throw the rescue swimmer into the water. But now he flies a desk for the Coast Guard as a federal employee. But it is, as a military spouse, I often would say my life makes your life possible because I stayed home and I did all, and I moved every 2 years. You know, when you stop, if anybody here is retired military, when you stop PCSing, you realize that you don't clean out every 2 to 3 years, and all of a sudden you have a room full of boxes, some of which have multiple stickers on them because you moved them a few times, but still have no room. But we get benefits as well, and so you should access them.
Absolutely. Well, let's transition to our last topic. We don't have a ton of time left. So without stepping on the toes of some of our next panels, we have 2 panels to follow us that are going to be a lot more laser focused on planning and the financial side of aging. But let's talk a little bit about planning. What are the key documents that every senior should have?
An advanced medical directive, a durable power of attorney. You want your will. What other things do people seem? So you need to have those. We create emergency binders. You need to have those. You need to know where those are, because invariably, and your agent, the person you name, they should know you named them. You would be surprised how many people name a family member and then that family member has to step in and they don't even know that they're in that role, because these are ongoing conversations. They're fluid. What other documents?
If you want to be a DNR, you need to have your DNR signed and in an accessible place. I'm sure people have seen the file for life in the fire department or the police department. Often I saw the police department was here, often give out on your fridge.
Yeah.
If you are a DNC, do not transfer, that document should also be signed.
And it has to be the form.
Yes.
You can't just have a letter saying that's what you want.
A most, oh, we do that. Post. Sorry, I work both in
Maryland.
Maryland and Virginia, so sometimes I forget where I am. We have the Pulse in Virginia and the Molson in Maryland. It's an important document that is often used. I'm trying to think what other documents.
List of your medications.
List of your medications, current medications, that's good to review. And also the important thing about documents is that you're reviewing them, and we go over this with our clients too, is you're reviewing them a minimum of annually, and every time you have some type of event, some type of sentinel event that takes place, or you feel you want to change things. A lot of times there are dynamics that happen that you decide you want something to change, whether you want the decision maker in your family to be different, or you don't want to have major medical interventions done, or you want whatever the interventions are that you've decided for yourself to be changed, right? So it's important to review those. It's not like a one and done kind of thing. Again, this is another one of those fluid type of situations where you do them, but you continue to review them over time to make sure they're still exactly what you want.
Can you talk a little bit about how the process and outcome that we talked about, how that can be affected if you don't have any of these documents?
Oh, yes.
So in Virginia, there is the Virginia Healthcare Act, I think is what they call it. It allows someone to speak to your spouse. Sometimes the doctors will do it, sometimes the doctors won't. Sometimes you don't want that first person who is the next of kin that they find to be the person that's answering for you because they don't know your wishes. If you don't have them, then they're gonna get 2 or 3 doctors who are gonna make a decision on your behalf.
And they may not be doctors that have the same value set or opinions or wishes that you do, right? They don't have the same background, they don't have the same thought processes. They may decide to do something that you really didn't want for yourself. So it's very important that you put in writing what it is that you want for yourself. We really advocate strongly that all of our clients have these documents in place because we want them to be able to self-determine. And if there is, as Heidi mentioned earlier, if there is a cognitive decline over time, that when the client was able to make the decisions and make their wishes known when they were cognizant, we did that, that was done, so that as things change over time, that has already been put in place.
Because sometimes people, you know, you have to have the capacity to name someone as your agent. If you don't have that capacity anymore, families are faced with a guardianship, and that is a big process.
Yes.
How does that play out in the scenario where perhaps it's time for assisted living for their documents?
So some assisted living, so I was an administrator in assisted living, and some facilities, communities will strongly not admit clients, residents without documentation. They'll put up, because for them, it puts them in a really difficult situation when there is no decision maker. Imagine from their perspective, when there's no one to make a decision, then they're put in a really difficult spot. When there's nobody to make financial decisions, when there's nobody to make physical decisions about what to do with this person or what to do with their things. If somebody passes away and then all of their things are there, or if the bills can't be paid, or when things can't be done, or if that person is needs to have a major surgery but the person can't make decisions, then what do? They live in the community but there's nothing to be done. So we oftentimes have gotten involved with different companies to help find who is the person to help that person, and gotten involved with attorneys locally to help all of that become a more copacetic situation. So it is really important that everybody, I can't stress enough, I stress this in my family with my parents and my grandparents, that you make your wishes known so that we can do what you want. You have the ability to determine for yourself. No one else is determining for you without your input.
And that really comes into play with memory care.
Yes.
There comes a time that someone needs to be transitioned to memory care, and there is no document in place. Communities really push back. In order to go into a memory neighborhood, here's the good news. A form has to be filled out. It's a form of severe cognitive impairment. A doctor has to say you really belong there.
Yes.
But if there is no document in place and your loved one does not want to move into memory neighborhood, but they need it for safety, that is a really big challenge.
Yeah, it's a problem because the Department of Social Services for Virginia has a form that a doctor must say that certifies that you are unable to recognize danger and that you have to live in a secure environment. And so it is very problematic.
Unfortunately, as we up here know from shared experience, oftentimes the need for a guardianship, conservatorship is triggered by financial exploitation of seniors. And it's really awful to watch and very difficult and expensive to resolve. So can you tell us a little bit from your experiences out there in the field, what can seniors do to protect themselves from scams and become victims of financial exploitation?
And we see it more than we would like, for sure.
Yeah, we see it a lot. We see it from both people close to older adults, even younger adults. I mean, we see it a lot. I've seen it both inside and outside of my family. We see it from people close to them, whether it's relatives, or we see it from outside people, whether it's emails, texts, letters. Never transfer money to people you don't know. Please don't ever transfer money to people you don't know. Romance scams are huge, huge. And just have the people in your life whom you trust that you've known, whoever those people are to you, whether they are family members or close friends or partners, have those people and your wishes put into legal documents. Have all of that stuff reviewed and in place so they can protect you and you can protect yourself.
You can report scams when they happen. So there are agencies through your cities and counties that you can identify. I had someone recently, and she was a financial step in very often and try to figure out how do we protect that person from themselves.
No, we've been involved with, to Heidi's point, cases where millions of dollars have been lost. We've had the FBI involved in money laundering, like, we've had to be involved in stuff like that before. And it's really unfortunate and sad, and could have potentially been prevented if we had been, potentially, if we had been involved and been proactive. And we have superseded situations where we've observed things happening and been able to stop stuff like that, so.
And get like look into programs like a LifeLock or another program that you protect yourself. Because on top of the scams, which are, you know, you owe a traffic ticket, you're about to lose your license, you know, sometimes there are the calls that come, grandma, I need help. They're pretty clever, but some of them are less overt. And so, you know, we have people who suddenly find out there are 3 mortgages on a house that they paid for. You know, that had been done in their name, accounts have been accessed. So looking to like the LifeLock programs, and there's other ones out there, I think are really good idea.
So keep your guard up, and as always, talk to your people, right?
Right.
Keep people in the know. Make your wishes known. So we're running up against the end of our time here, but if I could just ask one last parting question of each of you. So what is one lesson learned that you think every single person in this room should leave knowing today?
Planning, that's the number one, plan for the future. Have those difficult conversations. I mean, for every person that I have that has even planned their funeral, they've done everything, they've done every step, they're like, here it all is, you're good to go. You know, there might be 20 people that don't, you don't have to, you know, you can take it slowly. If it's ominous, do one thing at a time. Start with your legal documents. After your legal documents, what is the next thing that I need to do?
For me too, it would be proactive, and part of that being proactive is have the difficult conversation. It's really hard sometimes to have that difficult conversation with your family members or your close friends, but have it. And you'll feel almost always better afterwards. Be proactive and have the conversations.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's all we got.